All right, it is time for the major event. Oops, I just hit the monitor here. Time for the major event. The Bitcoin ETF is center stage, and tomorrow, in fact, by the time you watch this, it is possible that we will know whether it is approved or even delayed again. And let's discuss all the consequences of this and more in this week's State of Crypto. All right, so before we talk about crypto, let's take a brief look at macro right now. So basically, we've actually had a very strange start to the year of 2024. Since pretty much the beginning of the year, everything has just been on a kind of not free fall, but like just been dipping and dipping and dipping. And what we're seeing really is, again, a behavior of like tax. People had profits. They kept it up until the new year. They didn't want to sell because the moment you sell December in the end of December, you got to pay taxes on it for the next year, right? So in 4 months, they got to pay taxes on it. Or you could wait a few days, not sell anything, and then right after the cutoff, then you sell all your assets and you don't have to pay taxes on it until the following year, right? So that's kind of the behavior you're seeing. In fact, that is what you hear about when you hear about Santa Claus rally. So December, there's just fewer sellers, even especially when the market is up for the year. There's fewer sellers going into the end of the year. And then after the year passes, bam, a lot of people take profits and you see the market dip. Now, the good news is we might be past that hump, right? It seems like the last couple of days, the market has been positive. Even today, it's a little flat, but it looks like things are coming back. I think, like, again, we've talked about a couple stocks in some of the other programs. Like, I think we said Nvidia is probably going to go over 600. And by the way, Nvidia did drop a lot when we called that. And there's other stocks like Disney, for example, that maybe relative market cap to their valuation looks pretty good. But a lot of the other tech stocks, Microsoft, for example, we thought this year could be a little harder because they're going to have higher operational costs, and their new AI products, we don't know how they're going to perform yet. But I would still not bet against them, right? Maybe even Apple is another stock I'm maybe not very bullish on, just because it seems like the phones don't have that many updates anymore, and there's a slowdown in China. That's where a lot of the revenue comes from. So anyway, that's all kind of baked in already. We predicted that Q1 is going to be a little bit slower, and then it's only after rate cut hints happen where things are going to pop up. So that's kind of where we stand on the macro. There's a couple other interesting bits of information in the newsletter predictions. We predicted that there's going to be a lot of acquisitions. This is probably the first major acquisition of the year. Hewlett Packard is going to buy Juniper Networks for $13 billion. Massive deal. I mean, it's just in talks, but most likely with this much news that comes out, it's probably a done deal. So we're going to see more and more of these acquisitions. And apologies, I have another, I think I've caught another cold. So that's kind of like perpetual sickness happening over here. All right, so let's talk about the main event. The Bitcoin ETF. BlackRock says they expect it tomorrow, tomorrow being Wednesday. And there's been a lot of other hints of this happening. One thing that's interesting is MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, is going to sell $200 million of his company's shares. And the reason why that's interesting is maybe he thinks people were buying MSTR because of the Bitcoin ETF, because it represented a Bitcoin holding company. And now he's realizing if the ETF comes out, that is not as valuable, right? People can just buy the Bitcoin ETF rather than a Bitcoin holding company. So he sold off $200 million of the stake. You can see since the year has started, it's gone from 700 to 581. So you can see the market selling off MicroStrategy down 9% in the last week. So that kind of explains the behavior of that stock. It just has less value if there is a Bitcoin ETF. Now, all of the news in crypto land is about the amendments, the meetings, the different entities that are supporting each other. The big winners here are Coinbase for custody. Jane Street is going to be involved for some of the data of how things are calculated. Obviously, BlackRock, Fidelity are going to be the people that are offering the service of the ETF. They're going to get some of the commission, and I think the fees are between like 0.2%, 0.3%. They were actually higher before, and now everybody's due to the competition of all these ETFs, people are just dropping the price over here, right? Or dropping the commission, the fees, I should say. And we are getting hints that it is basically a done deal. I mean, everybody is very confident that it's coming out. Last week, we talked about Matrixport. Actually, we might not have mentioned it yet, but there was a report out there that said it's not a done deal, that the Bitcoin ETF can still be delayed. And that caused the markets to fall dramatically in crypto. And even over the weekend, we saw the same thing happen. So there is still some uncertainty. So basically, everybody asked me, is this priced in? Is the ETF priced in? The answer is probably no. If you see markets dipping downward, it means that there is not a confidence level that it's going to get approved. And it, again, the probability is probably like 90% that it's going to get approved, but that 10% can still happen, right? And if it does happen, you're going to see markets probably drop 20%, right? Which means you see Bitcoin go from 47 or 48K back to 40K. And then again, like it might continue to bleed. But the good news is there is a Bitcoin halving coming up in April. So there's like a counterbalance here of like, if the market dips 20%, maybe it's a good buy the dip moment because we're so bullish on the overall macro view. So anyway, that's kind of the things happening in ETF land. The other very interesting thing is Gary, actually pronounced Jerry Gensler, SEC chair, and he just came out with this random crypto Twitter thread. And you don't really do this if you're not going to approve the Bitcoin ETF, right? So it kind of seems like he's going to approve. And by the way, there's a committee of 5 people. Anybody on the committee could call for a delay, but it seems like 2 out of 5 are pro approving the ETF. And Jerry Gensler, I mean, if you post a Twitter thread about being careful about crypto, why would you post this right before the approval, right? In theory, like if you're going to reject the Bitcoin ETF, you probably don't need to explain yourself. I mean, who cares, right? So in theory, this is a positive signal that, hey, you should be careful about crypto because we're about to approve the ETF, right? Anyway, again, we're just looking into all these details, right? And you can see like people putting down their fees. Again, 20 basis points to 30 basis points is the range. BlackRock to 20 basis points is probably means that'll probably be the most popular one. It's got brand recognition and brand equity and the lowest fees. So I think that's probably going to win out on the volume. And now there's even data and news that as soon as Thursday, you can start trading the Bitcoin ETF. So that means even if there's a sell the news event on Wednesday, let's say the Bitcoin ETF gets approved, everything drops down, let's say 5% because people just like they're waiting for that news and they sell, right? That's a good buy the dip too. If the ETF is going to trade the next day, that means there's going to be a supply constraint. There's going to be, all the Bitcoin that got sold, I'm sure it's going to get scooped up from other retirement funds and whatnot. So again, this is very fun stuff. We are very curious as to what's going to happen. By the way, my computer is freezing up, so I am going to pause and close some stuff. Just give me a second here. I can't even see my mouse. All right, let's hope that everything is back to normal here. Okay, let's talk more about crypto. Bitcoin this week. If you guys heard of inscriptions, it's putting the data of the JPEG into the actual data of the block. People thought about other stuff. They thought about, we could probably put the Nintendo data essentially into a block because a Nintendo game is actually not that big. It's actually a similar size as some of the JPEGs, which is very, very cool fun fact. And they put this game directly into Bitcoin. So this is like another way of clogging the system, but also another way of using inscriptions. Visa, they're announcing a Web3 loyalty program with Smart Media. Basically, Visa and MasterCard, they're both like trying to figure out how to get into crypto. South Korea, speaking of credit cards, South Korea proposes a ban on using credit card payments. It seems that there are people getting into debt. They're using their credit cards, getting into credit card debt, and then buying crypto. There's also high fees on the credit cards. So that most likely, for example, if they lose like a 10%, swipe on the card, they're going to lose money. The probability is they're going to lose money, right? Especially if they're buying these like coins that are pumping like crazy and then they fall back. So again, there's some trends that people are like pulling back on the risks of crypto. Coinbase, they're gonna try to do a acquisition that will try to get crypto derivatives into the EU. This is going to be an unnamed company, but it has an MiFID2 license, and then that will allow them to trade derivatives. I'm going to cough one more time. Still, again, uncertain if this is a new sickness or the previous sickness, which is pretty bad. There was a scare this week about the IRS. If there's any transactions over 10K, you have to report the transaction as well as the social security of the other, you have to have KYC essentially. Maybe if I talk a lot, it forces me to cough. I'm turning red from the lack of oxygen. Okay, let's talk about crypto prices this week. Now, very interestingly, there was a massive dip over the weekend. And then when Bitcoin went up, you see this spike right here. This is when I immediately told the news channel that hopefully everybody's reading that it's time to buy. Like if Bitcoin shoots up just randomly and all the altcoins are still down, then it's time to buy. For example, Celestia, I even said on the news channel, I'm personally, Celestia is the one I'm targeting, and that is up. It says 15% today, but from that bottom, it was from $13, and then from $13 went to $16. By the way, an all-time high. So I think in the last week's video, I said I wish I got it at $12. $13 will have to do, right? Hopefully you guys saw that. I'm not saying that this is any financial advice, but I observed a trend. Bitcoin's up, all coins are still down on a dip. This is time to act. This is time to follow the trend. Most likely, if Bitcoin's up, all coins will follow. Clearly, not the case for every altcoin though. Just to call out, like what you want to do is see Bitcoin is up 3%. Ethereum is actually down 4%. Obviously, the ETF has something to do with this, right? Everybody's buying Bitcoin in anticipation for the ETF. But you can see all the other altcoins are down 10 to 15%. That's an interesting sign. That also signals that people are probably selling some of these altcoins either to buy more Bitcoin or that they know that there's going to be a rotation into Bitcoin for this main event this week. Very exciting stuff. A lot of the coins that we don't really think are that good, for example, Cardano and Polkadot are down more. And then Polygon is down 20%, which is a surprise. We have some news that we'll talk about there. But for the most part, yeah, everything is down 10, even 20%. Crazy stuff. Now, the Cosmos ecosystem seems to be outperforming everybody else, though. So we actually talked about this in the newsletter. Injective, we actually said like maybe overpriced now. But if you look at like Neutron or Kujira or Celestia, right? Out of all of these in the newsletter, I think we picked, which one did we pick? Crap, I think we picked Kujira, but Neutron is also up a lot over the last couple of weeks. But over that dip over the weekend, I obviously picked Celestia for that moment in time. Because we want to get in on these airdrops. So you buy Celestia, you stake it on your Kepler wallet, and then you'll just be you're qualified for all these airdrops that are coming up. Very shady, kind of Ponzi scheme-ish. As long as you realize that, it's okay. Now, the other thing that you probably want to look at is Stacks. Now, Stacks, again, one of our top 5 coins, is up 17%. Again, the whole market is down 15 to 20%, whereas some of our picks are actually up. And we give the reason why, right? Like Stacks is a layer 2 for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is starting to inscribe all these random things, putting random things of storage into the chain. So basically, Stacks again is kind of dipping now. So maybe this is another opportunity. We think Stacks has immense potential. And then again, Celestia, what we said buy over the weekend, and then it just like popped up 22%. So again, a lot of these we've called out. Not everything's a winner, obviously. Metis, for example, is something that we thought there was a mismatch of TVL and market cap. That is actually down lower than when we brought it up a week ago, right? So that is not good, right? I mean, it did go up 20% within the last week from the newsletter, but again, back down, which is bad, which we don't like. We think it's a longer term project if the numbers are real, and